on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Oh, okay, everybody. I apologize. We've had some technical difficulties this morning. I know many of you missed the opening of the show. I'll post it on Substack, and you can see it there if you want. But I'm thrilled now to be joined by my friend Lavora Barnes. Look, as chair of the Michigan Democrats, she created opportunities for folks in that state to get involved in their communities and in their government through the best kind of politics. Her work helped replace Republican rule in that state with a Democratic trifecta. Now she continues that work as a contributor to the Contrarian and as a consultant helping to build, both party and grassroots infrastructure. Hi, Lavora. So nice to talk to you again.
So nice to be with you again, my friend. How are you?
Thank you. I am, all things considered, considered that Kristi Noem is back in my city today. I'm pretty good.
Kristi Noem needs to stay out of your city. Come on.
Yeah. She's here on a stunt as usual.
Of course.
So it's hard to know. I thought a lot about what I want to talk to you about today. And I have some big sort of questions, but I'm going to save them. Just ask you about some of the news lately.
Okay.
Like, what do you make of of our Supreme Court to two things? Their crazy rule on the Texas gerrymander, ending the Voting Rights Act, I guess, and why even take up this question of birthright citizenship when there's no controversy? Every lower court has been clear what the Constitution says.
Well, you have to remember that this is a court that is as beholden to Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans as the Congress is, right? There are folks on this court who are there to just do the bidding of the MAGA Republicans, and that's what they're doing here. And it's so painful to watch and to live through, knowing what my parents and grandparents went through to fight to get the Voting Rights Act in place. The work that we have done, years and years of work to sustain it and grow it and to protect elections and protect the right to vote, the sacred right to vote, I like to say, Edwin. And the fact that this court is so quick and easy to just dismiss things that I thought, frankly, that we believe to be true as Americans. And it turns out that this court has a different idea of what it means to be American. And I don't think it's the idea that most Americans have. I think not only are they wrong, but I think that they are going against what Americans want, what Americans believe, and who Americans are. I recognize that there are folks who agree with what they are doing in the Supreme Court, but there are always going to be folks who are on the fringes of a democracy, but this is still a democracy, and in that democracy, the right to vote is an important part of it, and that means that we should be protecting it at all levels. And you're right, in terms of like stepping in where there is no controversy, where there is no fight, no one is saying anything different except that this court wants to. This court wants to weigh in because Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans haven't gotten their way in the lower courts, and therefore this court will step in and try to give him his way at the national level. And it's awful. It's awful. And it makes me think several things, one of which is we should have increased the size of that Supreme Court and put some good folks on it while we had a moment that we could have done that. And also, we have got to get focused not only on the midterms that are coming up, but on 2028, because it becomes so much more important who sits in that White House next, how we take back that White House, how we kick him out of that White House, and how we start to fix the Supreme Court. Because this mess that they have created and are continuing to create now is going to take us some time to undo, and we have got to get to work right now building the systems to be able to undo it.
I happen to have a Constitution in front of me, and I just want to read from the 14th Amendment. It begins, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States, wherein are citizens of the United States and the states wherein they reside. That is not unclear.
No.
That doesn't require, robed oracles to tell us what it means and doesn't mean. It could not be clearer.
It's so clear, and again, it's another of those things that we hold true as Americans. Folks throughout many years have been born here and know that they are Americans because they were born here. And the fact that we want to roll that back because this one group of individuals thinks that it's a bad idea because they want to. I don't know, actually, Edwin. I don't know what it is they want that I can put my finger on, except for they believe that people who look a certain way are the rightful Americans, despite the fact that this country existed before the white folks showed up at it, and that black and brown folks built this country, and that Native Americans were this country. But they believe that this country is supposed to be a white Christian country, and they want to do whatever they can to do that, including taking away the right of folks to become citizens of this country when they were born here. It's mind-blowing.
Worse, they want to strip the citizenship of people who are born there. Are they talking about in a nation of 350 million people, they're talking about 54 million people need to be thrown out of the country. It's as shocking and terrible a thing as ever. And on voting rights, the last part of the 14th Amendment says the Congress shall have the power to enforce by separate legislation the provisions of this article. It took them 100 years, but they finally did it, right, with the Voting Rights Act. And John Roberts is saying, oh, no, it doesn't say Congress shall have that power. It says I shall have that power.
So very clearly it does not, and it makes you wonder when was the last time he opened up his copy of the Constitution? I assume he has one.
It's so dangerous for all of us because they're rushed to be illegitimate as a Supreme Court. They're rushed to say, oh no, all of the lower courts are always wrong when it comes to Donald Trump, and only we know anything, means that we cannot have confidence in a Supreme Court. It means it's lost its legitimacy, and that's phenomenally dangerous.
Yes, phenomenally dangerous. And I think that we do not spend enough time talking about the danger to our country and to our democracy of a Supreme Court that has abdicated its role as the highest court and has just become a Donald Trump court. Like the idea that you have put people on the Supreme Court who have no respect for the institution, or at least not enough respect for the institution to understand that what they do is beyond just supporting the incumbent president, but is about protecting this nation and the rights of its people. It's shocking to me. It should be shocking to all of us, and we should all be very worried about where this is going and thinking about ways that we can put up roadblocks and get in the way of it.
Yeah, I mean, Hamilton wrote in Federalist 78 that we have everything to fear from a judiciary that is in league with the executive branch, that leads to tyranny, and we are seeing it.
Yes, we're seeing it. We're seeing it. And, I have been heartened by the way Americans have responded. I love watching folks show up to march. I love watching folks, raising the flag of this country alongside every other flag that they can outside their homes to say, like, I am American, and also I support this community and that community and these folks. I love that, and I am so pleased that Americans are finding ways to step up and speak up. It's a shame that we have to. It's a shame that folks in other countries are reaching out to ask, how can we help? Because we see what's happening to a country that we had a lot of respect for and actually wanted to aspire to being like, and now we're like, no, we don't want that. We don't want to be that, but we want to know how we can help you. Like, the fact that we have become that country this quickly is also shocking and surprising to me, because honestly, Edwin, I thought our democracy was stronger and more stable than that, and it wasn't, and it's not until we stabilize it.
I am, like you, there are things to celebrate, I believe. I am so unbelievably proud of my city of Chicago and the people in it for the way we have rallied around each other. And I see the lessons that we learned here now helping out folks in New Orleans and in Minneapolis. I'm really proud of that and proud of what people are doing here. So I'm an optimist, but I'm an optimist in the same way that I guess Americans were optimistic about World War II after D-Day. There was still a lot of carnage going to happen and a lot of damage. But I think we will win this. But my
I think we will
gosh.
too. And you know, I speaking of Chicago, I love watching all the things that folks in Chicago and other places have done. I have read some terrific stories of folks who blow whistles when they
Yeah.
see ICE coming to support people, and then of course the backside of that, I actually happened upon a social media post from a black-owned business in somewhere in the South who got backlash for having the whistles and giving them out to, I think, other patrons and
Yeah.
encouraging people to blow them. And I'm like, well, let me find your link and let me buy something from you, right? This
Yep.
is how I support.
Yep.
And I think that's the other thing that we all have to think about is how and where we spend our dollars and our time.
Yep.
Because that is a form of protest that we can all do. It's not easy for everyone. I know it's harder for some folks than others, and not everybody can buy, but you can choose where you do spend your dollars, and that also sends a message. And I think that's a message we all ought to be thinking about sending as well.
I couldn't agree with you more. Did you have a chance to see the 2025 National Security Strategy that was released yesterday?
I did not. What's in it?
Then, well, what in it was America's full-on claim that I mean, it's just it's poisoned with racist nonsense. It says there will be no migration anywhere in the world because these different races should stay in their own corners. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just it says Europe. Europe is, we don't need NATO anymore because NATO was signed by a Europe that was white, and immigration has changed it, so it's not the same Europe, so they aren't really not the people we signed that agreement with.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it is so shocking and terrible. And then there's this guy, Chris Rufo. You remember him?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
he is now saying employers need to give preferences to men with families in hiring.
What?
Forget qualified women. He said, yes, he said, absolutely. They're the breadwinners. If a man has a child and comes for a job, he needs preference over everybody else. And then they go further and says, and this is a direct quote, it's absurd that individuals can't hire whomever they want in their own companies with their own money. I mean, by all means, let's just bring back rampant discrimination, segregation, bigotry. It's not enough that Donald Trump's made it part of our government. This guy wants to be sure it's like seeped thoroughly still in the private sector, or again in the private sector.
Yeah.
I mean, the masks are off. We know who these people are. And I continue to think we're better than that.
I think we are. And if there is a silver lining to the masks being off is that we know exactly who they are, and we won't forget who they are. I think that, a lot of this was sort of hidden and quiet for a long time, and Donald Trump has given folks permission to say it all out loud and to act on it when they feel like it. Because
He's saying it out loud.
Exactly, because he's saying it out loud. And in many ways, I think about something my mother used to say to me is like here in the South, we know who the racists are because they are out loud about it and out front about it. You go up north and they're still racist. They're just more quiet about it. Yeah. And now that these folks are saying it out loud, we know exactly who they are. So we know exactly who not to elect. We know exactly who not to put in positions of power. We know who you are.
We know who you are. We know who you are. Mm-hmm. I want to talk to you about, because you have more sense. This is a conversation I can't have with everybody, but I want to talk to you about the coalitions that are part of a national campaign. And let's start on their side, on the MAGA coalition. Like, what do you think are the parts of that coalition, and where could we exert pressure to put cracks in it?
I think that there are already cracks in that coalition, and I think that they will continue to build until we have a full-blown fissure. I think I'm part of this organization called Democracy Defenders Action, and one of the things that I am so heartened to see is a number of folks who are Republicans or former Republicans who've joined with Democrats, very conservative people joining with very liberal, very progressive people, to protect the democracy. Yep. That's number one. Number two, you're seeing folks like even Marjorie Taylor Greene, whose name I want to even say out loud, has said enough along the way. Like, I think that Trump and the true far right MAGA folks have taken several steps too far for some folks, and they're starting to cause fissures in their coalition. I think by the end of this, they will be left with a very small group of white supremacist racists who we will never drive away from the core of the MAGA beliefs. But I think that they will lose anybody who has any semblance of kindness, intelligence, love for their country, love for their neighbor, love for their fellow human being, will all have pulled themselves away from MAGA. Because I think a lot of people got into it, and this is me giving folks a lot of credit, but that's because I've met some folks now. But I believe that people got into it based on lies, based on things they thought were true that were not true. And the more we provide information about the truth of what things are, the more people will go, well, that's not what I thought, and that's not why I became part of this. Yeah, and I think that's how education always comes back to, Edwin, education, right? We need to be able to teach.
I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene, for a lot of reasons, but high on her list, because it was her sort of top issue for a while, was the Jeffrey Epstein stuff.
Yes.
And I think you're right that in particular Republican women were worried that there was a class of rich Americans of both parties that was preying on young women and was being protected. And now that may be true, but the ones who are doing the protecting are Donald Trump and his Justice Department with absolute certainty. So that drove her away. What about the money? What about the billionaire class in America, the corporate leaders who are paying for his ballroom? Where do they fit in this coalition?
I think that they will be very hard to pull away from that coalition because, you know, if the center of your focus of belief is more money, more riches for yourself and your own, then Donald Trump's your man, and Donald Trump's going to continue to be your man. Which is why we get back to, you know, my earlier statement about the rest of us thinking about where and how we spend our money, because the way we impact those billionaires is to impact their bottom line. And because Donald Trump can provide them with an access to riches that we cannot, you know what we can do? We're consumers. And we need to consume the items that they're trying to sell to make them even richer. Let's stop consuming them. Let's just stop.
Yep. I agree with you. I think we can pull some of the women from that coalition, some, you know, some,
not all.
right?
Not all.
And anybody who used to be a Republican recognizes that the current Republican Party is just a different animal. The people who care about democracy will get peeled off, and maybe ones who thought they were actually going to deal with the economy and make it work for Americans. So I think
because what did the man say today? That affordability is a Democratic hoax? Like, really?
That's
people's ability
that's
to buy items, people's ability to take care of their families is a Democratic hoax? Wow.
Well, they believe their own lies.
Yes.
So let's talk about our coalition. You know, the last time the GOP picked off part of that coalition, right? Including, you knew this, in Michigan, they surely did. The question today for me, I guess, and I want to explore this with you, is not how we put that coalition back together. I'm not sure it was the right coalition. For me, the question is, how do we build a larger governing coalition that doesn't just squeak into office, but, Lavora, gives us the mandate and the votes we need to pass the necessary legislation to move us all forward. The kind of legislation that lets us, for instance, have an honest Supreme Court, or the kind of legislation that says to those billionaire traitors, you know what, you declared war on us in that great, big, beautiful bill, and now the tax bill is coming for you. Right? We need to have, how do we get that, what does that coalition look like? And how do we...
Right. So, and here's the I think one of our struggles is that when we start talking about coalitions, people automatically start talking about groups of people as though they are somehow different and separate. Exactly. And that the people in that group are a monolith. So we talk about Black voters, we talk about Latino voters, we talk about, you know, the Arab American voter here in Michigan, right? And I think that, number one, we need to stop doing that. And we just need to be talking to the voters about the issues they care about. And I think that one of the lessons that we are not doing a good job of learning is that at the end of the day, while each individual person and their community will have specific issues that matter to them, and we should not ignore those issues, overall, everybody cares about things like affordability. Everybody cares about things like protecting our children from predators. Everybody cares about education and healthcare. And we need to have a story, a plan, and a program for what we're going to do to protect and build on those things for our entire nation, not just individual parts of our coalition. And we need to run on what we're going to do and how we're going to help people have better lives, and not just run against Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. We just can't. We're not going to win this by saying those guys are bad, so vote for us.
So there are at least two consequences of what you said that come to mind. One is one that you have like painful lessons that you know better than most. That means telling the organized entities in our base that their habits are bad, that their habits are selfish, that we have to say it's not a good idea for our candidates to campaign by going from one of your forums to another of your forums where the only thing they get asked are special interest questions, and they never have a chance to address the broader public. And that's going to be a very tough set of conversations for us, because that's not that changes the way we are in the habit of doing our politics.
That's exactly right. And one of the things that I think would help us help those groups not feel like they have to do that is if when we got into office, when we elected Democrats, they actually did all the things they promised they were going to do while they were running for office. And just to use Michigan as an example, because I'm here and I love my governor, you're going to run on fix the damn roads, then fix the damn roads.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that one of the frustrations that so many of our coalition groups have is that we get into power and then they sit politely by and wait for us to do the work that we said we were going to do, pass the legislation that we said we were going to pass, and then the legislators don't get to it. They don't get it done. And that's the thing we've got to do. Otherwise, they're going to continue to feel like they're going to need to hold everybody accountable for very specific special interest issues as they are running for office, because they need to make sure that when you get to office, you know that that's what they wanted from you. We need folks to follow through when they win.
And that's it. That brought me to the second of the ideas that sort of came out of what you said before, and that is that we have to recruit candidates. While we are campaigning to save a democracy and campaigning on these sort of universally American themes, the candidates that we elect have to be specifically from the communities they're running from. They have to know those communities. They have to love those communities, because once they get there, they have to work for those communities. And that's different than working against the regime that's been in the way.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And when you elect folks from the community, you understand the community, they are also understand that occasionally they may have to work with someone across the aisle to get something done for their community. And then we, as the progressives who got them elected, can't come after them for working with Republicans to get something done, because they're trying to get something done for their community. Now, we can come after you for working with the Republicans to get something we didn't need or want. That we can come after you for.
You mean like giving away big tax breaks?
Exactly. Yeah. That's not why we sent you there.
Yeah.
But if you're going to get in there and fight so that I can have the health care that I need, so you can fight so that I can have the school systems that I need, so you're going to fight so that I can have free lunch for my kids in the school, okay, I'm in. Go ahead, do that. But you're right about recruitment. I think that, we have been very lucky here in Michigan that we've been able to have some really terrific candidates run all over the state, from school board all the way up, from their community. But the Republicans, they just run whoever, including, a guy who might actually live in Louisiana.
You have madmen in your state.
Exactly. Madmen. Exactly. But all over the country, we need to be about recruiting candidates, and we have to convince people to run who don't necessarily want to run, because I honestly think they make some of the best candidates. If you can convince them that they can make a change in the lives of their family, their community, and their state, and that to do that they can run a race that you can help them win because you're the party or your whatever organization is recruiting them, and then get them elected. Sometimes the folks who are quick to jump up and raise their hand are not exactly the right ones for what we're doing. Because sometimes those folks have selfish interests. They're doing it for, they want to, be on
Yeah.
MSNBC. I want folks that are doing it because they believe their community could use a voice like theirs in the legislature, in Congress, at the school board, at the city council.
Yeah, and it would help if they knew, and this is, I'm not knocking anybody, but it's easy to say, I'm good at social media. And it's not the same thing as I'm good at legislating. And I think about one of the legislators from Illinois in Congress is a young woman named Lauren Underwood. Lauren is a fabulous legislator. She's like in a very purpley district, very divided. She is she isn't jumping up around, jumping on TV, but she is working every day on legislation and being effective, even in this crazy Congress we have. That work got Clyburn to take her under his wing and show her what he could about how the place works. These are legislators we don't have enough of.
Yeah.
And I want to shout out to her and others like her, because I worry that sometimes, like the other side, we're guilty of looking at social media and thinking it's the world.
Well, you're right about that. And I think that in many ways we learn the wrong lessons about candidates who win who also happen to be social media savvy. And, you think that what we need are more folks who have a lot of followers. But what I think, like the lesson I think about, the next New York mayor, right? I think Nandani, who was terrific at social media, whose team was masterful at social media, he won because he talked about the issues that people cared about, and he told them what he was going to do about it.
He was a great candidate.
All know, and we
oh
all
my God,
know
he was
it.
a great candidate.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the lesson there isn't get somebody who's good at social media. The lesson is get somebody who can talk to people about their community. Somebody, just like you said, from that community, who understands what that community needs and has an idea and a plan for how to deliver it to them. Because we all know what he's going to do, because the rents are too damn high. The buses need to be free. They need free grocery store. Like, we all know it. I don't live in New York. We all know it because he's so good at that. So, although he also apparently is a little bit of a snake charmer, because Donald Trump may have fallen in love with him in the Oval Office, but he is a terrific candidate. Also happens to be really good at social media.
And I hope he can get it. I mean, a lot of the things, he's going to need a lot of help from the legislature and others. It's going to be very tough. But I know that just having him out trying to do that is great. And I also know that the solutions for Manhattan aren't the solutions for a lot of other cities in the country. And that's why we pick local candidates that have a big tent.
That's exactly right. Which means that we don't run clones of the candidate who just won somewhere to win in another city, because these cities are different and their needs are different. And if we can't get more local about that and stop having national conversations about local races, we're going to continue to get candidates in races that are more about the national than they are about the local. And that's not good for any of us.
No. Well, I mean, this is a time where you can't solve the local things because the national politics is so poisonous and the government is so terrible. But the moment we win, it won't do us any good if we're not ready to deliver.
And we have to deliver quickly. We aren't a patient people. Particularly on the left. Like, we want things done quickly. But this time, I really want things done quickly. I think that once we get these houses of Congress back, once we get that White House back, the work has to begin immediately, and it has to be swift. If we can say we've learned a lesson from Donald Trump, it's that you can change the face of this country in 100 days. So let's go do it.
Well, we do need a vigorous government, for sure. Absolutely. And he's certainly shown what powers the presidency has, although I think he's also acted illegally practically every day.
Yeah.
So I'm not counseling us to do that.
No, of course not.
Where do you think in all of this lies the need to hold people accountable? I mean, we failed to hold Donald Trump accountable for January 6th. He ran out the clock, and no one held him accountable. When Barack was president, we failed to hold any of the bankers accountable for the incredible disaster of 2008 when people lost their homes all over the country. We, there's a frustration that, the rich and powerful just never get held accountable. You and I know we have to deliver for people, but there's another thing we have to do, I think, which is to show America that, everybody is subject to the law, and we have to hold people accountable. How do we do that?
I think that one of our problems is that we believe in getting the work done and moving forward and taking care of the issues, and so we are quick to say, let's put that behind us and move forward and keep it pushing. I think we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. We're going to have to figure out the way to continue moving the legislation that needs to be moved to fix the problems that have been created by this administration, and also hold people accountable for their behavior during this time. We have to do it. It is an expectation that the American people have that we will do this. It's important to our democracy that we show that there are consequences for failing to meet the obligations of the office of whatever you have run for, that there are consequences for flouting the law and breaking the law over and over again. There have to be consequences, and we just can't push it aside and say we've got to get the work done. We've got to do both things, and we can. We have enough intelligent folks on both sides of both the legislative side and the political side of our world that we can figure out how to do both of these things, and some really terrific lawyers who can start filing cases, who are filing cases now and will continue to, and we just have to keep it going. We cannot stop just because we've won. And that's, Edward, you've sort of put a finger on one of my fears, is that we will have a strong midterm next year, which we will, knocking on all of the wood, and then we'll get comfortable and complacent, and we can't. The fight needs to continue. We need the same energy and anger and frustration that we have right now that is driving these small elections that we're seeing happening, special elections, close elections in districts that we have no business being close in. We need that energy to continue past the midterms and continue on past 2028 as well. Like, we have to figure out how to keep going and not dismantle our structures and dismantle our infrastructure and sit back and watch and see what happens when we don't continue to do the work. We have to keep going.
Yeah, well, I continue to be supportive of, first, if I think the leadership of the Democratic Party is not in Washington. It's in the,
Correct.
I mean, like, what I saw amongst people in my city fighting back against ICE, and what I see in the Congress of the United States is just, they're different animals. And it's not the same skill set, and they're not the same energy. And when the second time Congress had to vote on a continuing resolution, and they said no. The first time they just said yes, and they passed a bill that gave Donald Trump all those emergency powers. Mm-hmm. The second time they said no because the rest of the country pushed them to say no.
Right.
So I don't, with no disrespect to Hakeem Jeffries, I don't know him well enough to say, sir, your judgment is all we need. I think what I want to say to him is, sir, there are 1 billion people in America who are determined that you do not sit on your hind end and say business as usual. Let's just count on, what groups are with us here and there, what lobbyists are here and there.
Yeah. And I think that we're going to have to do something that, I'm going to be honest, I have discouraged in the past, which is we're going to have to be loud about holding our own accountable as well. Because we have seen that the noise from the people helps drive the members of Congress to be stronger, to fight back, to step up. And I wonder how much of that would have happened had American citizens been quiet about it. But
yeah, none is the answer.
Exactly. And because we weren't, which means we can't get quiet. We just can't. We can't ever get quiet.
There was one of my favorite movements in the United States happened right before the Civil War. They were called the Wide Awakes, and they were the biggest until now. They were the biggest public protest movement in American history. We don't really know about them because once the Civil War started, they all just joined the army and fought and won that war. But they used to like put on costumes and bring, band instruments and march to politicians' houses. And out in front of their houses, they would invite them out and say, hey, Abe, tell us what you think about, and make them give a speech right then. Wow. Out there, putting pressure on them. Like, what do you think about extending slavery, into the territories? And it's a fabulous thing that happened. They changed the whole country by saying, you know what, these guys work for us. We're going to ask them what they think. We're going to put pressure on them. We're not going to tar and feather them, but we're going to hold them accountable.
It's funny. I just learned about the Wide Awakes a couple of weeks ago in a conversation I was having with someone who was hoping that his grandfather had been part of the Wide Awakes. Turns out he wasn't, but he was hoping that he was. Yeah. And that it is so much a model for who we're going to need to continue to be as we move into what as I knock on wood again, what will be a Congress that is democratic, which I have all kinds of hope and faith will be once we do the work of knocking the doors and all of that we have to do.
Well, as long as we have fair elections. Yeah.
Exactly, as long as we have fair elections, which, we can't talk enough, Edwin, about how important it is that we police those elections, we manage those elections, and we're going to have to do that. We have to support our election workers and the good secretaries of state like here in Michigan, and then we're going to have to hold feet to the fire for the Republican and others to make sure that we're getting these fair elections. And I think that this is another place where Americans are just going to have to step up and say we won't stand for anything less.
And just to put a specific point to that, here in Chicago, where Kristi Noem and Greg Bovino have made it perfectly clear their stormtroopers will terrorize people. If you are, on their target, if you're a Latino, vote by mail, vote early.
Yes.
Vote by mail early because they'll be out at the polling places.
Yes.
Trying to make it harder for people to vote. So vote when they're not looking.
Yes, all of us who do this work need to be thinking about how we put together strong vote-by-mail programs for those communities to protect our neighbors, to make sure that they don't have to risk going to the polling place, knowing what these folks are going to try to do at these polling places. Just vote by mail early.
Yep. Well, there's also this question after the election. I see this scenario in my dreams, and it's the nightmares, where we manage to pull off an election. We manage to count the votes. We manage to win. And the Speaker of the House says, those elections, those states didn't obey Donald Trump's executive order. They're illegal. We're not seating the delegates. And of course, Donald Trump's executive order is not law on elections. It's state laws. But I don't put anything past them these days. They've proven they have no bottom.
They've absolutely proven they have no bottom. And I think that our saving grace perhaps remains the American people. But it is so hard to imagine how we respond in an environment where we don't have a Supreme Court. We don't have people who will listen to courts who tell them that what they are doing is wrong or illegal. Because my answer to that should be, well, we're going to court. And we will, obviously. We will obviously be in court. But I can't honestly say that we can count on the court to do what's right here either. It is such a precarious spot for this country to be in. And I'm gonna say, I don't know the answer, Edwin. I don't know what we do.
We need that old muscle, which is all of us out making our voices heard, the kind of organizing that we did. Oh, I don't know, to get the Civil Rights Act. I don't know, to get women the right to vote, or to get the 8-hour work day or the 5-day work week. None of it happened because the courts were polite or Congress just thought it was a good idea. All of it happened because Americans said, we need this.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, because Americans demanded that we have this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we can't wait until that moment comes to demand. The demands have to start now, and they have to be a steady drumbeat of demands. It has to be very clear so that we don't get to that point.
Right, because really all we're demanding is an actual future.
Exactly.
Right. Oh, well, that is going to be where we end because we've run ourselves out of time very quickly.
That was fast.
I love our conversations so far. I love them.
So do I.
Well, thank you so much, and keep up the good work, and we will talk again.
Yes, please. Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody, take a break from the news, and then I recorded a wonderful interview with Melissa Sanchez. Been on before, you've heard her. We'll come to that when we come back from the news.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody, Melissa Sanchez is back. She is, of course, an investigative reporter with ProPublica. She covers immigration. She covers, low-wage work. Basically, it's fair to say she covers a whole big chunk of America. And she's based here in Chicago. We spoke last month about her work to find and talk to the men who were dungeoned in CCOT. And she talked to many of them after they got out about that just awful experience. Now she's taken a look into the consequences of that infamous federal assault on a Chicago apartment building. You know, one where Greg Bavino and his thugs used a Black Hawk helicopter and they zip-tied kids and they generally terrorized everybody. At the time, we were told, well, the building is a hotbed of Trendagua, a Venezuelan gang, and we're just going after the worst of the worst. But now, because of Melissa's reporting, we know better. So, Melissa, first, again, I cannot thank you enough for looking at America and telling these stories that are just sort of shockingly underreported around the country.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on, and I enjoyed our conversation last time around, so I was thankful that you invited me back.
Well, yeah, it always makes me nervous when somebody says that at the beginning of a conversation. I hope you feel that way again at the end. But all right, so to talk to us about what you found when you looked at what happened subsequent to that awful night.
Well, so I worked with a team of 4 other reporters. It wasn't just me, but this big raid happened in the early morning hours of September 30th. We didn't start reporting on this until a few weeks after. At that point, it had gotten a ton of local and national media attention because it was just such a spectacular incident. I mean, it's really unusual. It hadn't been seen nothing like that had been done in recent history in a U.S. city, like having agents rappel from helicopters to the top of a building. There was 300 agents at this place. American citizens got zip tied for hours. Like agents went in, busted down doors, took almost everybody out, citizen or not, and then took away 37 immigrants, including families, men, women, and children. And a lot of the coverage that had been done until we published our story, almost all of it was just on the U.S. citizens who were detained. Nobody had actually been able to identify the Venezuelans who were taken that night. So what our reporting was able to do that kind of set us apart was identify the immigrants who were taken and find out who they were, how they got there, what their backgrounds were. Was what Trump and his administration had said about them true, and also like what happened to them since. And like I said, the administration had said there were 37 immigrants detained. We were able to identify 21 men and women from Venezuela, a bunch of kids in addition to that. And we interviewed 12 of them and kind of got their accounts from what happened inside the building that night.
Well, before you get into that, the difference between 37 and 21 is 16 people. Do we know what happened to those 16 people?
I mean, no, yeah, I have a good sense. I mean, they had similar fates to the others. I just wasn't able to verify everybody's names. The 21 were the ones that we were certain were there that night.
Okay. So they're not disappeared. They just were good. I'm happy.
No, and I'm happy to tell you what happened to all of them. I mean, it's been a mix of outcomes. Some are still in this country's federal immigration detention system. I get calls from them on an hourly basis from different facilities.
Talk about what happened. First, generally speaking, the narrative of the federal government was that they were going after the worst of the worst, and that this building was a hotbed of this gang called Trendagua that apparently is, in somebody's mind, responsible for a good chunk of the drugs that are brought into this country. Does that claim hold up based on what you have found?
It does not. So we interviewed several dozen people, immigrants and not, who lived in that building or were connected to that building. And nobody that we spoke to had any awareness of there being a gang presence. And it's not to say they could have been telling us not the truth, but people were clear that there were problems in that building. There were immigrants who were involved in crimes in that building, and people did not shy away from telling us that. But there's a difference between being a young guy who has, I don't know, shoplifted or committed some random crime and somebody who is an organized, part of an organized criminal enterprise. The federal government, the Trump administration has labeled the Tren de Aragua gang a terrorist organization. That's like a really big deal. And none of the people that we talked to said there was any evidence of actual Tren de Aragua members in that building. But there had been crime. I mean, there had been a murder in the building over the summer, a pretty gruesome murder involving a Venezuelan who allegedly killed another Venezuelan, like point blank shot him in the head in one of the units. That did happen. I mean, that guy's in jail. He's awaiting trial. And it's the building full of poor people, full of African-American and Venezuelan people who had nowhere else to go. Go ahead.
Let's talk about that for 1 second. Because I think before we get into the context is important. And this is context because of your reporting you know about, but most people who are listening don't. This building was full of code violations, it's in a tough neighborhood. It was filled with people with very low incomes, just struggling to get by. The troubles that you report on in that building, are they orders of magnitude different than other places that are sort of situated in a similar economic part of our culture?
No, they're really similar. One of our colleagues was able to look at the data on 911 calls at that particular address and at other addresses. And it is there were more calls for police, for emergency services there than say, I don't know, a neighborhood like on the north side of Chicago. But compared to other buildings in that neighborhood, it was pretty similar. And the building, it was in terrible shape. I went into it several times after the raid took place. I mean, you walk down the hall and it smells like urine. The plaster's falling off the walls. Like there's animals that live inside, like rats.
Yeah, the city didn't do its job.
Sure. And neither did the landlord. I mean, like that place was, and a lot of the tenants were supposedly paying rent. A lot of them had stopped paying rent. There were people who had never paid rent to begin with. There was also this really fascinating thing that we weren't able to get into in the story, but there's rhetoric from Stephen Miller and from other people that the Venezuelans there had taken over the building, that they were like squatters who had forcibly taken over the place. And I found evidence that there were a couple of guys who lived there who were not paying rent, who were Venezuelan. But the vast majority of the Venezuelans, families and just regular single men, they thought they were paying rent to the landlord. But it turns out there were African-American and Venezuelan people in the building who acted as if they were landlord and were charging informal rent to people, which was just super fascinating. But like I heard this over and over. And one of my colleagues actually interviewed an African-American man who lived there who acknowledged that he was one of the guys who was going around collecting fake rent from people. So it was just a very messy situation. All of that does suggest, yeah, both the city did not probably pay as much attention as they could have, and especially the landlord. That place had been abandoned.
Right. So what we have here is a picture of some of what poverty in America looks like. That's what it looks like in some places, and on top of that, now you have the federal government saying that's not the problem here. The problem here is that this is a foreign gang come to terrorize our country.
Right.
I can't get my head around that. All right, so that's the background, that's the context. You talk to the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I interviewed 12 of the people who were inside that night, actually more, but 12 Venezuelans we were able to talk about in the story. And it was really scary. And some of them shared audio messages that they had sent out via WhatsApp to their friends where you can actually hear the helicopters in the background. You can hear people screaming. People were woken up in the middle of the night. It was about 1 a.m. and they start hearing boom, boom, booms of doors getting broken down. They hear the helicopter over the head, and masked agents with lots of weapons like enter their apartments without knocking on the door, and they basically haul off the men. The men are kind of the targets, the immigrant men. They're zip tied. The women and kids, everybody end up being moved out of the apartment building. And I will note that there had been some questions on social media about whether the children were zip tied, and we did not find any evidence that happened. None of the Venezuelans we spoke to said that kids were zip tied. So just so your listeners
I'm glad to hear that. I never repeated that, which I won't do again. So thank you for.
It could, of course, and it could be that other kids did get zip tied, but none of the people we talked to who had children said that happened to theirs. But the men, several of the men said they were shown photos of some other men and asked about them and asked about Trendiarawa. But the guys in the photos that the agents showed them were not people who lived in the building, and so that led a lot of people to think maybe they were looking for somebody who doesn't actually live here. So this happens within the course of a couple of hours. Everybody's taken out. I will note that several men and other people were able to get away. They either crawled into the elevator shafts and just waited, hid in other parts of the apartment building, jumped out the window and ran, and which sounds to me like a pretty chaotic and nutty situation. But we're aware of people who are Venezuelan who were in that building who did not get detained by agents that night. So it wasn't the big success story I think that it has been painted to be. But after this happens, all of the immigrants are hauled off. They're processed. The men are taken to Clay County Jail in Indiana, which has a contract with ICE to do the detention of immigrants. The women and kids are kind of split up. Some of the women and children are sent down to Texas to a family holding facility for immigrants, and some of them are there for weeks. I talked to one woman who was there with her 6-year-old son for close to a month before she finally gave up on her asylum claim and went back to Venezuela. And some of the other women and children, especially those who had U.S.-born children, they were released later that day. They were processed. Some were released with ankle monitors. Others were released without ankle monitors and given time to get their kids' passports and paperwork in order so they could be returned to Venezuela. And I talked to some women who did, after a couple of weeks, return to their country.
With their American-born kids.
With their American-born kids. I mean, they weren't technically deported, but they were returned. And I think the bigger picture accountability point that we make in the story is this was a huge show, a made-for-TV spectacle. And I say made-for-TV because a cable TV news video crew was invited out to record the heroics of Border Patrol and ICE, getting inside the building and dragging out these tan skin guys with their hands tied behind their backs. But despite all of the kind of spectacle of it, not one of the immigrants who was detained that night was charged with a crime. there's been no case made in federal court that one of these guys was like a terrorist, an Irawa member. There's been nothing. Instead, they've been getting deported one by one by one by one. And some of them have even gotten what's known as voluntary departure, which is kind of like a deportation, except it's given to like the good immigrants. And I'm making air quotes with my fingers. It's given to immigrants who don't really pose a security risk to America and who are allowed to reapply to return. So it just really begs the question of what did they get out of doing this?
You are too young to know that in 1985 in Philadelphia, Mayor Wilson Goode dropped a bomb on a neighborhood because there were people living in a building called, it was like MOVE is what they were called. And they were, activists that the city didn't like. And they dropped a bomb on a whole neighborhood. It was terrible. This is the closest I've seen since 1985 and Wilson Goode in Philadelphia, where the government says we are going to have a massive show of force. We're going to do it for the purposes of intimidation. And they lied to everybody about the cause because, as you point out, not a single person was charged.
It's really incredible. And I do think who knows if they really were looking for somebody who wasn't there that night. And maybe and we don't know what the government knows that they won't tell us. Like, it's worth sharing that the response we got to our very many detailed questions was the same response that like one of my pals had gotten from them a few weeks earlier when she went to from a different publication. Like they didn't answer any questions. So they might have, they probably have intelligence that we don't have. But from what we can see, they have made no showing of like having gotten anything. And, like when police or federal officials do big, exciting busts like this, they typically have a press conference after, and they'll have a big table where they lay out the guns and the drugs, because they said there were guns and drugs and even explosives in the building. But they did none of that. They showed nothing. They didn't even, like, they came out and they said, we had detained 37 immigrants and 2 confirmed Tren de Aragua members. They said that they got 2 confirmed Tren de Aragua members. They didn't identify anybody, any of those people. We were able to find, and the Department of Homeland Security's website, they have like a page where you can look at all their news, all their press releases. And in one of the press releases they had about Operation Midway Blitz, this thing that just ended, this long, border patrol in town doing extra immigration enforcement, they've had press releases about the so-called worst of the worst guys that they've been able to arrest. And one of the guys in one of the press releases, they name, but they don't say what country he's from. All they say is Jean-Pierre, Ludwig Jean-Pierre Parra Perez is a gang member, a Tren de Aragua gang member, and that's all that they have on him. And I happened he was one of the guys I happened to identify, like through the reporting work, that he was one of the people in that building. That press release didn't reference him having been taken that night in South Shore, But this guy's record is all of like a traffic ticket in Chicago. He's in his early 20s. I was able to talk to him while he was detained in Indiana, and he said to me that our letter to him saying like, "Hey, you are the one guy we can identify from this bus that the government has claimed as a Tren de Aragua member." He called me from jail, sounding so afraid. He said it was the first that he'd heard of it. That he worked doing construction kind of odd jobs. He has like a newborn. An American-born newborn. Him and his girlfriend were like they were in their apartment the night when that happened. He denied being a gang member. I mean, he could have been lying to me, but it's not. He doesn't have the kind of record that would raise any eyebrows to anybody.
Okay, and we know that the federal government, the President of the United States went to a press conference, showed a picture of a man with gang tattoos on his fingers, which weren't actually there, right? It was a doctored picture. So when it comes to who has credibility here, you talk to a very poor Venezuelan living in this dump of a building who's got a girlfriend and a kid, and he might have an incentive to lie to you. But you also have a government who has no credibility because they have been lying about all of this. So how do we get to how do Americans eventually get to the truth of this moment?
It's such a good question, and I feel like that's what I'm going to be trying to wrestle with the next 3+ years. That's what I've been doing all year. It's really hard. I mean, I do my job because I think telling stories that are true, even if they're complicated, like it's not black and white. I mean, nobody there was like a perfect innocent immigrant. Like everybody's, a human and has complicated stories. I do think it helps. I mean, we have to do really basic fact checking, and it's hard when we don't have the information that the government has, but I don't know. I think we just have to keep doing these stories and trying to point out the things that are true and the things that are not true. Some of it like looks good for the government, some of it doesn't. Like, I mean, telling you that kids weren't zip tied, like, okay, like it's probably good to know, even if a lot of like, anti-Trump type people are like, yeah, he's zip tying children. Like maybe they will be disappointed to hear that part wasn't true. But like, we got to set the record straight whenever we see something that isn't accurate. And, and this kid, I just remember this guy, the supposed Trinidad member, Jan Pierre, right before we published the story, I kept watching all the videos that the government had put out of that night. And the videos show these kind of like scary looking dark men being dragged out of the building in the middle of the night, surrounded by these like heroic looking agents. And maybe the day before we published, I was rewatching one of the videos, and I realized that at the very end, in one of the videos, there's a guy being in the back seat of a van where he's been detained and he's getting ready to get taken out, and he looks like he looks mean and angry, and he's got like a tattoo on his forehead. And, kind of the way that the what you were describing, like the tattoos on the fingers or like this mean looking gang guy. But then I look closely, I'm like, wait a minute, that's Jean Pierre. And he doesn't have a tattoo on his forehead. And I was like, oh gosh, he had told me, and his girlfriend has told me, and their friend had told me that the agents had scrawled his apartment number on his forehead with a black marker. And we hadn't, and they had written the apartment numbers of people on their arms and on their chests. And we had seen that in the videos, but we hadn't seen it yet. We didn't include it in the story initially because we just weren't certain if that was true. But then I realized like he looks like he has a tattoo, but that's really his apartment number written on his forehead. Like, oh my God, I don't know what to make. But the videos of what happened that night, the government has put out. Like, if I didn't know any better, he looks kind of like a tough, scary guy who maybe should have been arrested. And it takes a lot of work to figure out what is true. But that's what we're trying to do. We think it's important.
So they didn't zip tie the children. What did they do to the children? Were they kept with their parents? Were they separated?
They were, from what I know, and I didn't talk to every single parent. I've talked to a lot of the parents, though, the Venezuelan parents. The mothers typically kept the kid. Mm-hmm. If there was a parent with a child, I mean, they were, like I said, either sent to this family detention facility in Texas, or they were processed and released. I have not heard of children who were physically separated from their parents for longer than like a few minutes, like during the initial busing into apartments.
And how do you get sent to Texas? This is a bus ride?
No, by plane. The one mom that I talked to who spent a month in jail with her son said that day, like all these women and kids were they were processed for hours and hours and hours. And many of them told me their kids were hungry, their babies needed milk. But hours and hours later, they were processed initially in Broadview, and then some were taken downtown to another processing center. They were kind of driven around for a while the guys were bused down to Indiana. But I think...
But help me understand this. Are they in handcuffs during that time? Are they in leg shackles? Tell me understand what's...
The women were not the women with children that they had to care for. I don't know if women who didn't have children were... I don't know the answer to whether they were cuffed. I think some of them probably were, but probably not for the entire process.
Okay, good.
But these women, the next day with their children, they spent a night at a hotel somewhere near the airport, and the next day they were flown down to Texas.
And which airport?
O'Hare is what I understand, but I could be wrong. But I'm pretty sure I could be wrong on that because they don't always have a good sense of geography themselves.
Yep.
But my understanding, like from other reporting, is that some of the folks are kept near O'Hare before their flights.
All right. So then they get sent down to Texas, where they are encouraged to voluntarily leave the country.
It's sort of, I mean, the conditions are such that they feel like that's the best option for them. I mean, this woman with her 6-year-old boy, his dad was taken to a different facility in Kentucky. And so the little boy cried for his dad every day. And he stopped eating. They're Venezuelan, they're not Mexican. A lot of the food given at that place is more like Mexican food, which was hard for for a child to want to eat. Like I have kids, like my kids barely want to eat peanut butter. This woman told me that, and they're really poor people. They had nothing. They had nobody putting money into their commissary accounts. But some of the other immigrant women in the jail would buy her son ramen noodles, which he would eat. So she was really grateful for kind of the generosity of other poor people in there with her. But she had wanted to fight for her asylum case. They'd like a lot of the people in that building, the immigrants who came in, like the government likes to say that they're illegal immigrants. And it's just really complicated, because there are people who came into this country, some of them with appointments to approach the U.S. border through what was an app.
Through the app.
Through the app. Yeah. And so she and her family had waited in Mexico for months, eventually got an appointment, came in through the app, filed their petitions for asylum, got work permits. They were kind of in the system.
So they broke no law.
It's just so, it's just not that easy because at the same time they're allowed to enter the country and pursue an asylum case. They're also put in the deportation process. So both things are true at the same time, which makes it just really difficult to talk about. They didn't come in, walk in as citizens or as residents. They were deportable immigrants who were also allowed to pursue.
So they had an asylum claim. Now, one of the problems, of course, is the administration is getting rid of all the judges, so you can't even hear the asylum cases, right? We don't know. I mean, the asylum is a legitimate thing. People in Venezuela, I mean, Trump himself says Maduro's a bad guy, says himself, we might go to war with Venezuela. Political prisoners are killed there. And so...
Yeah, it's a messed up country, but it also, the vast majority of these people were economic immigrants, so they would tell you that if you asked. So they weren't people who would.
They wouldn't win an asylum court.
I mean, I'm not an immigration judge, et cetera, but I don't think they have the claims. Yep. But regardless, they're here, and our country let them in and had an appointment with them, brought them in. So this woman was in this situation, but she's unable to contact her husband. She doesn't know what's going on with him. Her kid isn't eating, and he's losing weight, and she gives up. So after 3 weeks, she asks to be deported. I think a week later is when they finally sent them back. And so she went back to Caracas with a sister. She hadn't lived there in years. She'd moved to Ecuador, I think, many years earlier with her family. Yeah. And she's there now. Her husband just recently was sent back. She sent me a photo of the three of them together. So he took the deportation as well.
I mean, I'm happy for them they're together for sure. But what a harrowing night for them and for everyone there.
It just sounds really scary.
So have you been able to piece together any reason other than to put together a promotional video that this had to be done the way it was done?
I mean, no, I don't know what they know that we don't know. Like I said, there was a murder there earlier this summer.
Yeah, well, that doesn't distinguish it from lots of places in my city.
There had been a news report about the murder from what is it called? The CWB, that criminal justice website in Chicago.
Yep.
They had the headline, or somewhere very high up in the story, they described it as a Tren de Aragua murder. Nowhere in the police records, in the court records, is that noted. There's no gang affiliation at all noted in that. The narrative doesn't indicate any kind of criminal organized activity. But what did happen is there was that post that referenced Tren de Aragua. Within a week or so, DHS issues a detainer for Cook County Jail, and that means that they basically ask Cook County Jail to hand over the suspect in that case, and they make a press release about that. DHS, Cook County is failing to give up its illegal immigrants who killed people, or whatever their headline was in their press release. That press release from DHS does not say Tren de Aragua. They were careful about it because nowhere in the official record, nobody's ever actually called that murder a Tren de Aragua murder. But in their press release, they linked to that CWB report. So that's the only thing that we saw. But because it's based on something that isn't based on any facts, we like we didn't even feel comfortable like linking to that. But that could be a place. And after that DHS press release came out, Breitbart wrote about it, and we know that the president pays attention to Breitbart and kind of and Breitbart wrote about it in a way that you could imagine Breitbart would write about it. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of Venezuelan immigrants in Chicago, and there are other buildings like this one in Chicago where there are Venezuelan immigrants who have moved in, and some of them don't pay rent. And there's been this public narrative that has been, talked about for at least a year now with Aurora and even here in Chicago of like Venezuelans taking over buildings. It could be that this was like an opportunity to really capitalize on that narrative in a building where the landlord was trying to evict people and to
Did you get to speak to the landlord?
No, the landlord did not return any of our
So the landlord didn't want any part of this. The landlord obviously doesn't have a story to tell that he was somehow put out. For all we know, the landlord, I mean, this is Chicago. This true goes on in every city. If he's a bad landlord, he could have had tenants in the building helping him push people out, helping him make life miserable. So.
No, and there have been some sources have said to us and to other outlets that the landlord might have provided some of the information to the government to get rid of these people.
Oh, Melissa, we are out of time, I'm afraid. But listen, I just love your work. It's so important. And across America, if you are working for a very low wage, or, if you are in that part of our economy, so much of America pretends you're invisible. And yet so much of America, so much of the quality of life of wealthier Americans is supported on the backs of the people that you write about. So I love it, keep it up, and I'm grateful to you for doing it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's my beat, the people nobody cares about. I'm happy to write about them.
Yeah. All right. Well, so this interview's over. I hope you still want to come back another time because it's a conversation that needs to continue.
I would love to. Anytime.
Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate it.
Okay. Take care.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody. That was pretty interesting, but we're going to go from the immigration woes to budget and Congress woes. And for that, I'm really happy to be joined again by Bobby Kogan. He is the Senior Director of Federal Budget Policy at the Center for American Progress. He served in leadership roles at OMB and the Senate Budget Committee. I think we first talked when he helped us understand the big, ugly bills reconciliation discussion, and then again to help us comprehend the stakes of the fight for the continuing resolution, that fight, that led to a record government shutdown. Bobby, welcome back.
Edwin, thank you so much for having me on again.
My gosh, Congress is feeling the heat on health care. I'd love to get your take on that. I thought I heard Donald Trump say, oh, yeah, we have a plan for that. And I thought I heard Speaker Johnson squeak quietly, no, sir, we don't. I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we're caught between the fact that congressional Republicans desperately do not want to extend these enhanced premium tax credits, and the fact that they actually know that it is really bad for them politically if they don't. So what's this? What's the debate? What's going on here? In the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare, we created premium tax credits to help people that were very poor but not quite poor enough to be on Medicaid afford health insurance. Under Biden, we greatly kind of expanded them. We upped the benefit for the poorest, and then we made it so that all the way up there was a cap. You'd have to pay no more than X percent of your income on buying health insurance, and that goes all the way up. I mean, the amount you'd have to pay depends on how rich you are, or that percent depends on how rich you are. But that's what we did. It's done on a temporary basis, but it was always meant to be permanent. We just did 1 year and then an additional 2 years, and the idea is that it would be made permanent when something nothing happened with the Trump tax cuts. Republicans want a trifecta, and they move to let them expire. If they expire, it means on average the 22 million Americans who benefit from them would see their premiums double. And so Republicans are caught with the fact that you have a lot of working class and actually middle class and actually some upper middle class people seeing their premiums skyrocket, and the fact that they hate these in the first place. So Donald Trump said, fine, we'll work on something, and congressional Republicans balked. Trump, took away his, the next day, he said, okay, never mind, I'm not doing anything. And Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune have kind of been adamant against, but you're starting to see a whole bunch of members in the Senate and in the House saying, no, we want to do something. We already kicked many of our constituents off of Medicaid. We don't think we can also afford to have a bunch of middle class people have their premiums go up 50%, 60%, 80%, 200%.
I have such a hard time believing that they care, regardless of the politics. I mean, how many years have they had to give us something to replace the ACA? Donald Trump promised it 10 years ago. Oh, I'll have a plan in 2 weeks. We have the outlines of a plan. It's just going to take 2 more weeks to write it down. That was 10 years ago, Bobby.
Yeah, so you're totally right.
And McCain gave that thumb down, 8 years ago? I mean, they just do not believe the government should be in the business of healthcare.
Yeah, so you're totally right. They don't want to do it. They never, in 0 years would they ever affirmatively vote to create this. And the super majority of them are happy to let them to let it die. Politics be damned, and their constituents be damned. But there are some of them who say, "Oh, I don't know, man. A lot of these people voted for me. Not many, right? But there are a handful. And since the margins are so tight, you might actually see enough for a discharge petition through the House. Now, does that mean you can make it through the Senate with 60 votes? That's that's a whole other story. But it's just to say, what's so different about this group is that it is so many of the people who are kind of core people in their base. It actually hits Republicans more than Democrats because in Democratic states we expanded Medicaid. And so a lot of these folks are in states where they didn't expand Medicaid. And so because of that, they're not on Medicaid. And because of that, they're instead getting these enhanced premium tax credits. So it's a lot of Republican voters. Again, to your point, many of them don't care, right? Many members of Congress, they just fundamentally are against the government helping poor people get health insurance.
Talk about the health insurance for people who aren't poor. Just because if you get private health insurance, is there also a subsidy to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's just I'm glad you bring that up. That's one of the most crucial kind of points that I think no one is talking about here. Everyone who gets private insurance is having their health insurance through your job is having your health insurance subsidized. You don't see it that way. You see the price and then you pay that price. But all these companies are getting ESI, which they get to kind of write off these costs. And because of that...
Tell people what ESI is.
Yeah, it's the employer-sponsored health insurance tax deduction. And because of this, all of these companies get to write off these costs. It's artificially lowering the cost of health insurance. So if you get your health insurance through your work, that is cheaper because of the government, right? So tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of Americans have subsidized health insurance. It's only these people in the private market where all of a sudden there's a debate. And what's so crazy here is that, if you look at the Republican complaints, they say, I'm unhappy that it helps people who are too rich, and I'm unhappy that some people get $0 premiums. Well, the employer-sponsored health insurance is regressive. It helps it helps richer people in the private market more than it helps poorer people in the private market. And I don't have $0 premium health insurance, but about 1 in 5 Americans who are getting their insurance through their union or through their job do. So a ton of Americans are already getting this benefit through the government. It's just when it comes to very poor people that all of a sudden Republicans have this big plan. So that's, it's this asymmetry here. And I should say, while we're at it, right, like this is a tax credit. It was in, it's just a couple months ago in the so-called big beautiful bill where Republicans extended giant tax cuts that disproportionately went to the richest Americans, right? About as much went to the top 0.1% of America than the bottom half of Americans put together in terms of like total benefit from these tax cuts. They were happy to do enormous tax cuts for the rich outside of this, but all of a sudden when health is involved, they say, oh my gosh, I couldn't possibly help someone who's making 80 grand a year. You're too rich, you deserve no help.
Yeah, I mean, that big, beautiful bill's tax cuts meant that you and I and the taxpayers of America paid for Jeff Bezos's private wedding when he took over Venice. That our tax cuts paid for all of those billionaires and their private jets to fly to be his guests at that wedding. Right?
That's
this
right.
is who they are, right? Like, fly to Venice, take over Venice. The taxpayers are going to subsidize it, like we're going to, have Donald Trump's ballroom where the White House used to be. It's just, sorry. Can I digress?
Yes, please.
When you name a federal building in Washington, doesn't that require Congress to name the building?
Usually, yes, it does.
Yeah. So this week, I understand and that Donald Trump's name got carved into the Institute of Peace. So it's now the Donald Trump Institute of Peace, according to the chiseled wall over the building. Like who paid for the chiseling? And it's like, does Congress have anything to do with anything that has to do with money anymore?
They're supposed to, but they have been abdicating their duty, right? They've been abdicating their responsibility. The whole point. I mean, whatever, right? Like, let's go back to the English Civil War. One of the things that the king was hanged over was usurping power from Parliament, right? Right.
Yeah.
And so, and that was like the whole. I mean, we tend to use allocation and appropriation interchangeably, but if you want to go back to the British system, back in the day, you just had absolute monarchy. The king, as long as there was money in the treasury, the king just did whatever they wanted. But eventually, we switched to the allocation system, where the parliament would allocate some amount of money to the king, and then the king did whatever they wanted with that amount of money. But we deliberately switched from an allocation to an appropriation system where all of a sudden, instead of the king deciding where the money was going to go, Parliament would say, okay, we're going to do this much on this, this much on this, this much on this, this much on this. And that word appropriation comes into the Constitution, right? Our founders said, okay, we're going to do that model instead. And what the president has been doing is illegally not spending the money that he is supposed to spend. And in some cases, illegally spending money he doesn't have, right? That is like quite literally what got a king beheaded, along with other things. And you see even the appropriators, right? Like you've seen some incredible quotes from longtime Republican appropriators saying, basically, what are we even doing anymore? What's the point? And of course, what's tough here is that rather than stand up and say, okay, well, I'm going to stop everything you're doing until you back off, a lot of them are just quitting, right? They don't want to do the fight. Like some of them are frustrated, but not that they're too cowardly to stand up. They know that could cost them their election, and so they just preemptively quit and say a couple words. Or Tom Cole, the House Republican appropriator, lead appropriator, the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, he basically gave cover to Donald Trump doing the illegal pocket rescissions, where he just illegally refused to spend billions of dollars, and because of that, millions of people overseas, primarily kids, are gonna die because we stopped this aid. He gave cover to that. He has given cover to the illegal Anti-Deficiency Act violation the president did, where during the shutdown, the president illegally refused to to spend some money on food stamps, but he also at the same time illegally spent money on the military. Now, of course, we say, oh, well, I want to make sure the military gets paid. But what he did was he spent money he didn't have. He took money from shipbuilding, right? He took shipbuilding money and he took R&D money and he spent it on the military. And I tried, I wrote about it at the time, but what's so crazy, if you really think that the president can take a pot of money that lives over here with your left hand and spend it on something that it's not allowed to be spent on, then your options are pretty unlimited, right? Like imagine President AOC says, okay, I'm going to take this money that's supposed to be for ICE, which lives within the Department of Homeland Security, and instead I'm going to spend it on climate, climate weather research, weatherization efforts. Because FEMA is also within DHS,
Yep.
right? Republicans would drop impeachment articles that day if she took ICE money and spent it on climate research. But that's the equivalent of what President Trump has been doing. It's a complete mockery of our entire system. And as I say, the broad the only thing limiting you at that point would be your own imagination, right? That made up example. I was just sticking within DHS. There's no reason you have to stick within DHS. Use ICE money to do public housing, right? There's a reason we do appropriations, and it's because the president's not a king.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't just messing with our system. This is quite literally what our founders described as tyranny.
Yeah, they saw it. They saw this. They saw the old system and said, "We're absolutely not doing that."
Yep.
Because again, right? It just once you're at that point, there's no stopping them. And what's so difficult here is that not to blame the British system too much, but what's so difficult here is we're also based on the British system of standing and suits, right? In plenty of other countries that are not based on the British system, if you break the law, you broke the law. There you go. And you go sue. You say, hey, they broke the law. There you go. And they get in trouble and they have to stop doing it. In the U.S., we have to find standing. There has to be a cause of action, right? There has to be kind of a specific way of kind of stopping it. And what's so difficult is that the conservative Supreme Court has been nuking standing. So even if the president is flagrantly breaking the law, ideally, Congress would just step up. But if congressional Republicans are unwilling to step up, ideally, then we can sue and we can say, oh, you're breaking the law. You have to stop breaking the law. But what the Supreme Court has been doing is saying, well, yeah,
maybe we'll decide later when we come.
Yeah, we'll decide later. But for now, they can keep doing it because you weren't actually harmed by him breaking the law. Yeah. So, an example I've been thinking about is he's been promising rebate checks. Of course, congressional Republicans really don't want to do that because then that would be money for poor people, and they don't want to do that. But the president knows that it would be incredibly popular to send a $500 check to everyone, and if he did that, he just generated money out of nowhere, and he just spent it even though he didn't have authority. No one could sue. You could sue, but no one would have standing to stop him, and they'd say, "Well, yeah, it was illegal, but you weren't harmed. You weren't harmed by getting $500." Or what if he sends it only to his fans, or only the people who give him a direct donation, or only the people who voted for him? Something incredibly corrupt. And all of a sudden, we have no ability to stop him, and no Congress that wants to hold him to account either.
Yeah, it's just terrifying. And the question people have said to me, I can't tell you how many times, but he can't do that. And my answer always is, he's going to do whatever he's going to do until he's stopped.
Yeah,
so the question isn't can he do it; it's can we stop it. And I think the courts have limited ability to stop them because of the Supreme Court. But Congress probably has the ability to stop them, but maybe not for much longer. But they have to use the power they have. I know the public has stopped them, and we stopped a lot of their terrible behavior in Chicago during Operation Midway Blitz. They did terrible things, but not nearly what they wanted to because we stopped them.
I think
People
that's
have a lot
right.
of power.
We should remember that the president is fundamentally a coward. He just is, right? Someone said during his first term, he's like a weak man's idea of what a strong man is, right? He's all bluster, but he's a coward, right? And when he got I would never, you never have to hand it to Mitch McConnell. I think, he's one of the most destructive forces in politics in my lifetime. But Mitch McConnell was willing to roll Donald Trump. He lots of times he wasn't, but he was willing to roll him. And I don't know, 5 times that he rolled him during Trump's first term, every single time Trump backed down because he knew, because he's a coward. And so we just always have to remember that we are all stronger than he is. Yeah, he'll do a lot of bad things, but we can always push back, and it always matters, and we always succeed partially. Not as much as we deserve to succeed, not as much as the people who we are fighting for deserve, but we always succeed some.
Yeah, and that's the best we can hope for until we get rid of them. Let me ask you another in the weeds question. When this government shutdown ended, I believe the Congress didn't just pass another CR. There were like some appropriations bills in there. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so what really happened, and what does that mean, and where are the rest of those bills? And since the House is in the witness protection program and nowhere to be found, this is the Senate doing all this by themselves? What's going on?
That's funny. So the U.S. has unique and uniquely terrible government funding system. Most of the rest of the world, you just pass a budget, funds everything, and if you can't agree, you dissolve parliament and you try, see if he shakes out differently, and you try again. The U.S. has 2/3 of its budget is roughly partially on autopilot, or you check in perennially or whatever. The other third of the budget we fight about every year. How much are we going to give NASA this year? How much are we going to give NIH this year? How much are we going to give EPA this year? That's what we kind of fight about in our annual appropriations bills.
This is called the so-called discretionary budget?
That's exactly right. This is the so-called discretionary budget. It's a bad name because it's not but anyway, but yes, that's the so-called discretionary budget. And it is funded across 12 individual bills that are often stapled together into what's called an omnibus when you do all 12 at once. Yep. Sometimes you do a smaller portion of them, and that's what's called a minibus. And so when they did the CR, they did a CR for 9 of the 12 bills, and then they passed a 3-bill minibus. Now, they did the easy ones first. They did the money for our veterans, right? And they did military construction, and they did money for the leg branch for themselves. But you could say it's for themselves, but it's because it's really easy, right? There's not really anything to debate. We're going to give the staff their salaries, and we're going to give the botanical gardens some money, and I'm sorry, I'm totally blanking on the third one right now. But anyway, so they did 3 very easy ones. And so they're busy making some progress, maybe, on the remaining 9. There's some stuff that's really easy, and that's what the Senate is trying to... The House is, as you say, is in witness protection.
So the House just okayed what the Senate did.
That's right. They knocked it down a little bit, but what's basically, when we talk about Congress, abdicating its power, the president released a budget that was insane, called for I can't even put into words how insane the cuts were. And the Senate said, okay, I'm going to ignore you and we're going to do our own thing, which is, a small increase over what we saw last year. And the House said, fine, we'll work to the president's levels. Well, lo and behold, the House gave up and couldn't do it, right? Because they were too crazy even for the House Republicans to try to do it. And because of that, the Senate made a bunch of bipartisan progress and the House didn't. And so the bills ended up looking 90% like what the Senate did, a little bit lower than the Senate levels overall. And that's what we're seeing now again, right? The House has completely abdicated. They're working a little bit maybe with their Senate counterparts, but the bills that we're starting to see kind of come out are roughly to the Senate levels. And at the same time, the Senate is actually proceeding with a 4-bill minibus, which that's exactly actually what happened last time. They first did that 3-bill minibus just themselves, and it became the basis of what happened. And so we think that that's basically what's going to happen again. Now, this is good, right? Obviously it doesn't stop any of the evil things that President Trump is doing. But what I should say, it's insufficient, but it's more than zero. Attached to these things are a handful of guardrails that have gone after some of the legal malfeasance that Trump has been doing. He's been doing
this is what the Democrats were able to get into these bills.
That's right. That's exactly right. There is Trump is doing some legal malfeasance and he's doing some illegal malfeasance. And then there's some stuff where we don't know what he's doing. So it might be illegal or it might, it might be illegal, it might not be illegal. And when Democrats were fighting in the CR, in the shutdown, they were fighting for some ways to go after some of the illegal malfeasance. Inside of these bills, we got a bunch of ways that are going after the legal malfeasance. We got a few things that we're going after a little bit of the illegal malfeasance, and we got a bunch more reporting, which will help us with the parts where we said we don't actually know what's going on.
Okay,
Yeah,
give me an example of each of those.
So for the legal malfeasance, when Congress appropriates money, it normally is like, okay, here's money for this budget account, and then in a non-binding fashion, Congress will attach a bunch of report language, a 500-page document to the back of a bill saying, by the way, under the hood, here's what we had in mind. And in the past, if the president didn't follow that, Congress would just threaten him and then he'd back off. But Trump has just been ignoring those non-binding suggested levels. So for instance, in the education space, there's some account where there are like 17 different sub-levels where Congress had an idea, and Trump stopped doing all the ones that helped minorities. All the money is being spent, but he stopped doing the ones that were minority specific, and that's under the hood, and it was legal. And so what they started doing is they started incorporating those non-binding tables directly into the law. Into the law, exactly. And that's something we have been pushing for since last time, and we've now begun the process. Yeah, so that's one of the legal malfeasances that we're going after. The illegal malfeasance stuff. So this isn't technically I'll give a different one, which is he's obviously been illegally riffing people. I know the courts have upheld some of it, but just because the courts say it's okay, anyway, we have some objective reality here. And so he'd already cut a whole bunch of people, but for places where he hadn't begun cutting yet, like the VA, we had inserted language that basically leaving him exactly where he wants to be. And broadly across the government, we also put in language that, at least for the duration of the CR, completely limit any further rifts. And I know you're like, well, he could just do it anyway. What was really clever about the way that he did it here was that we made it an Anti-Deficiency Act violation to break it. So he might have been breaking other law, but here he's breaking a different law.
You've been very clear what law he would cross.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it's very clear. And so you will have standing. You will win in court if you sue this way. Yeah. So there's that one. And then the third one, we have a bunch of new reporting requirements. We just have tons of them.
Because we need some transparency into this.
Correct.
I mean, okay. Well, you and I have just run out of time, and I think we were just getting warmed up. Bobby, I really appreciate what you do to help all of us understand the arcana of American government budgeting and how important it is. I really do. And when you're not helping us, I know you're helping the folks in Congress try and get it right. So I appreciate it.
And thank you so much for having me on. I don't know what to say other than budgets are boring, but they matter to real people. 70% of what we do goes to people. That's your healthcare, that's your food, that's your housing, that we help you. And I know no one cares about this stuff, but it just matters so much because that's the difference between being able to put food on your table or not for so many different people. So I appreciate you giving me the time to be passionate about something that no one cares about.
No, I think we do care about it. Everybody knows budgets are values. They're value statements. They say what you care about. Right? And this government, as you said, that what they cared about was let's make sure no money goes to poor people or people of color. That's right. It's important. Thank you, Bobby. We will do this again.
Looking forward to it. Thanks again, Edwin.
You bet. All right, everybody, we're going to take a break for the news. And then I got a reporter I haven't talked to before, but I think she's great. And I talked to her yesterday, and you're going to hear that as soon as we come back.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid, on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. Many of you know Sam Levine. He's been a guest on this show a lot. He turns out that a great organization like The Guardian has a lot of great reporters. And they even have a lot of great reporters who focus on democracy. Rachel Langang is one of them. She is the Midwest and democracy correspondent for The Guardian. She lives here in the Midwest, I think up in Minneapolis. And I'm a big fan of The Guardians. And Rachel, I'm a big fan of your work.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I am in Minneapolis, so Midwest represent.
Well, we're going to talk about that before we're done, because the troubles from Chicago have migrated your ways. So I want to talk about that. But first, can I go back to a story you wrote just a little while ago? Because you did an analysis that caught my attention of the folks who tried to overturn the 2020 election and have ended up now in the Trump administration, which is terrifying. And I'd like you to tell us about some of those people.
So my thinking behind that story was we need to remind people in an upcoming midterm year to be paying very close attention to people who are going to, rerun their efforts in 2020, but with far more institutional power than they had at that time. So there are people now in the Trump administration who hold roles that oversee elections to some degree. I will note, though, that much of our election administration happens locally, so in states and counties, municipalities. The federal government doesn't have as much of a role in those day-to-day decisions, but they can do a whole lot, and that's what should be concerning. Harmeet Dillon, who was part of the Trump campaign's efforts to overturn the election in 2020 legally, she now leads the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. Heather Honey, who is an election activist in Pennsylvania, she is now in like a newly created role called the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Election Integrity in the Homeland Security Department. Kurt Olson, who was a guy involved in the Stop the Steal movement, he's now a special government employee and he's investigating the 2020 election again. And that's just a couple of them. Those are the more prominent ones. But I think it's safe to say that Trump's litmus test of, buying into the stolen election narrative is helping staff his government. So
I hear two things. One, they brought these people in, but they brought them in either to undermine future elections or to continue their befuddled and losing effort to claim that the 2020 election was rigged. Are they still really working on the 2020 election?
I would say to some degree, yes. I don't think, though, that that's the purpose. And from everyone that I've talked to who's been paying close attention to this, their main concern is what this means for future elections. And now that you have a crop of election deniers who have the force of the federal government behind them, how can they use that then to undermine results in 2026 in a way that in 2020, they didn't have that same level of power?
Okay, well, how can they use this power to undermine our future elections?
There are a couple things that people are very concerned about. I mean, one is just there have been a lot of efforts to get a bunch of data from the states. And they haven't even necessarily described how they intend to use it. But the belief is they'll try to make claims that voter rolls are inaccurate, contain a lot of people who aren't U.S. citizens, but who have been voting or who could have voted, and kind of use that to undermine results or file lawsuits against states if results don't go their way. There's also a lot of concern with, the way Trump has used the military and his increased federal agents in cities, that if you do that around an election, it can depress turnout. That's something that people are very scared about. And then also just like the bully pulpit of the federal government is really big, so how will they cast doubt on results in a way that kind of stirs up people at local levels, similar to the pressure campaigns that we saw in 2020 on state lawmakers or county commissioners trying to get them to not certify results?
Okay, let's take those one at a time. So the first one is that this push for data. So they've asked for voter rolls, right? They've asked for voter rolls from past elections, current voter rolls. And your sense is that they want a national voter database that maybe they can tie to whatever information they have on citizenship in an attempt to show that people are on voter rolls who aren't citizens. Is that right?
That's essentially what people believe they are doing. But there's also the sense that even if they got all of this data, it would not be accurate. It wouldn't be up to date. It wouldn't capture what they say they're trying to capture. And if all states don't participate, it's not going to be complete. So that's what the stated purpose is. Whether that plays out to any degree, who knows? Another purpose of that, too, from what local election officials and people who advocate on their behalf have said, it really it slows them down. It takes them off of their work. It distracts them. They think that that's also part of the purpose, just like keep them working towards something that, doesn't actually help them do their jobs. And then it kind of helps also establish this narrative that they've been pushing for a long time, that the voter rolls in the U.S. are very messy, have a bunch of people on them who shouldn't be voting, and that the rolls are like part of are part of undermining elections because they're just not up to date, that kind of thing.
Okay, well, so Rachel, is there any evidence that they're correct?
Basically, states do regular maintenance on their voter rolls as a rule. I mean, they usually have laws that they're following in order to do that. They're very careful, too. They're not removing people without a purpose. And to my understanding, I don't know of a state that just straightforwardly does not update their voter rolls. It's a very common part of running elections. So
how many cases of voter fraud did the government successfully bring, in this last year? I mean, so we had Donald Trump won an election. He won. But after that election would be when you would prosecute the people who fraudulently voted in it. How many people has this Justice Department found fraudulently voted in that last election, and how many have they successfully prosecuted?
Oh, I'm not sure off the top of my head. What I will say is that every election has some level of fraud. It's usually people who vote in the wrong jurisdiction or who double vote. Sometimes people who vote on behalf of a dead relative. Those like one-offs they're very rare. Like there's not widespread or systemic voter fraud that's been proven. But I don't know the extent to which they've been investigating
that. Maybe it's 5.
Yeah, I would bet it's it's probably very low. I mean, I would
enough
bet that
to change any election result in the country.
No.
Okay, so based on nothing, they want to add millions of hours of compliance work for for already stressed state government workers. And they want to do this in an environment where, I should ask this before it's not established. Are you aware of incidences where folks who work in election offices around the country are getting threats from people?
That has been a steady state for probably the last 5 years at this point. They pretty consistently get threats and harassment. Many of them have had protocols in place for how they manage those, especially in like swing states and swing counties.
Yeah.
They get a ton of that. I think for election administrators and like their professional organizations, it's one of their main concerns. And it's not even just election officials, like sometimes local, the city council will get those sorts of things as well. Like the threat environment is very high, consistently high.
So my understanding is that local governments have said we would welcome federal help. We would welcome help in making sure that the folks who run our elections aren't threatened. We would welcome extra resources, which we need in order to more efficiently maintain our voter lists. But as it is, we're going to do it. It's just a whole lot of work. And now instead of helping us, you are trying to require millions of extra hours of work for these workers who are already stressed and under threat. That's
I think there's always a lot of things that local and state officials would love help on. I mean, one of the main things that the state and federal governments have often worked together on in elections is cybersecurity. And that capability, from what state officials have told me, they feel like the federal government is no longer a credible partner in that. So they're trying to man those things on their own at this point. Wow. And like, those are the kinds of things they really want help with. I don't think there have really been efforts to genuinely assess what they want or need help with and then move forward as an actual partner. It's more, we think this is a problem. We're going to go after you for this information. And several states have said they're not giving it over. And like, there have been lawsuits now from the federal government trying to obtain it. So.
Well, it's not the federal government's data. They don't have any right to it. So I assume
well, and also like we should mention too, there's like actual privacy concerns with that. I mean, this is like there may be social security numbers attached to it. Like there are concerns with amassing one big database of every voter in the U.S. That's what the states say in terms of one reason why they don't want to hand it over.
Yep. Okay, so that was threat one. The next one you raised was not related so much to the election deniers in the government, but to the massive increase in the big, beautiful bill for a domestic security force. And you and I both live in cities where that domestic security force is now shown what it is. Here in Chicago, we saw them use a Black Hawk helicopter to attack people in an apartment building. We saw them regularly take U.S. citizens and put them in detention. We saw them tear gas streets, go into daycare centers and round up people who were taking care of babies. And all the while, we saw them go to court and lie about what they were doing. And I know that because that's what the evidence found, and that's what the judges found. They said the government lacks entirely credibility on what they say is going on and what they say they are doing. And now they've come to your city for the stated purpose of ridding your city of Somalis.
Yeah. We can see how this is playing out in a non-electoral context, right? This is intimidating people. From what we've heard from the local community here, there are people who don't want to leave their houses now. And Somalis, for the most part, are U.S. citizens or legal residents. Like, they are largely documented. Yeah. Many of them have been here for decades at this point, and maybe second generation. Because their settlement began in Minnesota in the 90s. But if that's how it's operating on like a day-to-day basis, where people are not able to leave their homes for fear of being, I guess at best, asked for their ID, at worst, taken, you can imagine that if this same presence was happening while people were actively voting during like an early voting period or election day, you would see depressed turnout. And studies that have looked at even having like a police officer at the polls, that posture can deter voters. Militarizing or, adding law enforcement presence to polling places, it has a chilling effect. Yep. Yeah. And then, there have been in the past too, where it was like, well, we don't want election workers to be harassed. They really have to weigh, well, then how do you respond to that, with the law enforcement? Like, do you have them there knowing that also can have an effect? So even in like the best of circumstances, they're usually not taken to the polls, that kind of thing.
Yep. So Rachel, now putting those two pieces together, this notion of, well, we want their election data because we know, parenthetically, with zero evidence, and in fact lots of evidence that it isn't true, but we know that illegal people are voting, and now we have a domestic security force to make sure that isn't happening. Just having them in your city could lower turnout, but having them go surround polling places and say, we know illegal people are voting in here on election day, could be devastating.
Mm-hmm. There's also the belief as well, or I guess the fear, among some that, because the federal government does not have a lot of direct authority on elections, that Trump could declare a national emergency and attempt to take over control of elections. Some of his allies in the election denial movement have floated that idea and said it's a smart idea. But Trump himself has not said whether he would do that. I do think it's worth noting, but I don't know how realistic that is. And certainly, like many of his efforts, it would end up in court immediately. And hopefully people will be able to stop something like that quickly. But, that's on the table from people who have direct ties and have his ear on this issue.
Yeah, you're a journalist and you are going to stick to what the story already is. I am not a journalist. I'm married to one. I really appreciate the incredible effort it takes to stick to reporting what the facts are and not speculating about what they're going to be. So I respect you for that. My own view is this administration has no bottom, and they will do anything. They've already demonstrated everything we thought was you can't break through this line. They have broken through the line. So I wouldn't put it past them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the last item you raised was just the bully pulpit, was just continuing as he did before January 6th to claim that election results that don't go his way are only because of fraud. And people who certify them are, I'm going to be very mad at you, Mike Pence. You can't certify these elections. They're fraudulent. And we have seen in previous elections, not just his, but around the country where his partisans have had to be ordered by courts to certify elections.
Yeah, I used to live in Arizona, and there...
Prime example.
Yes,
Yeah.
There was a county there that, it's still, I believe it's going to jury trial at some point this year or next year. But yeah, I think it really can't be understated the pressure campaigns that will likely result if if Republicans were to lose the House. They would probably do a similar playbook to what had happened in North Carolina with the Supreme Court race there last year, where after the fact, the Republican candidate who lost tried to eliminate voters en masse after they already had voted by saying they didn't qualify for various reasons. I think that's something we could see again, and you would see, Trump, people in the Justice Department or the Homeland Security Department pressuring those local officials to do things like that, to, take everything to its most extreme conclusion. And I think in some states, too, we're seeing that some of these election boards will have an insider threat. They have members on them now who believe the 2020 election was stolen and are inclined to kind of go along with what Trump is seeking if this happens. In a way that I think in 2020, that was a rarity. The fact that I brought up Arizona and you knew who I was talking about, it's great because it really didn't happen, beyond these few instances. But I think it has a broader potential this time than it did before.
Well, you also brought up the North Carolina election, and I think that was 82,000 voters that they said, if I remember this correctly, 82,000 people who had voted legally. They said they wanted to change the law after the election to get rid of their votes.
It started even more than that. It initially was something akin to, it was at least six figures of people that they were trying to disqualify for various reasons. And that drug on for a very long time. Many months. The court there, the elections board tried to, solidify the justice who won, but it went through the courts. It took forever. And I think the lesson from that too, I think some people were trying to say, well, the lesson here is that the system worked. Well, the lesson to me that I took away was, whoa, look what you can do in one place to drag out an election for 6 months. You can picture that happening in many places at once. and just how chaotic that would be, and how much pressure Trump would be putting on people as that happened. I thought it was a really disturbing canary in the coal mine.
As we saw after, again, in Arizona, a woman was elected to Congress and she wasn't sworn in for weeks. For weeks. The Speaker of the House denied that state its representation. Now, this was because they were ducking the issue of Jeffrey Epstein, but nonetheless, she won. And the people who elected her had right to representation, and one person said, no, you can't do it. Is there precedent, therefore, when Republicans lose the House in elections, for them to say, oh, I'm sorry, those elections didn't follow Donald Trump's executive order on elections, or the SAVE Act, even though neither of them is law. Therefore, we will not seat the winners, and we will keep control of this body.
I suppose they could attempt it. I think in those instances, the hope, and I would say still the belief from many people who, work in the democracy defense space.
Okay, let's just talk over whatever that background noise is.
Okay.
Nothing we can do about that.
The hope is that when those things happen, they would immediately go to court. And so far, the courts have served as a bulwark to those sorts of things.
Okay, that's what I was hoping you were going to say. And yet, what do you make of the Supreme Court's decision on the Texas-based, race-based gerrymander this week?
It's interesting because the redistricting issue, the court has often, they explicitly allowed political redistricting. The weirdness of this whole issue, we never see mid-decade redistricting like this. It's overtly political, but that is legal now, according to the court. And
they didn't say it was legal. They said there was nothing they could do about it.
Yeah, they don't tend to weigh into what are legislative decisions as often.
Yeah.
But I wasn't surprised that they ruled that way. I, if anything, was a little surprised that the lower court ruled the way that it did. And I guess this likely then, I'm not sure how it will play out with the other states, because I also wrote a couple weeks ago, which actually could have been a couple days ago. I don't know. It's been a lot of news these days, that there actually is a good amount of resistance among Republican state lawmakers on the redistricting front in places that are pretty red. You're seeing it to some extent in Indiana. We'll find out soon here if the Indiana Senate does have the votes to pass redder maps. I don't think they do. But I talked to people, Republicans in Kansas, and there are some in Nebraska, who are just like, I don't think this is right, and I'm not going to do it. And I'm not, I represent my local community. I don't represent, the federal government here.
I think there are good people on all sides who serve in government in the United States. I do. Mm-hmm. But in this environment, I hope they gerrymander everything, because what we saw in results, even in the election that Democrats lost just this week, was that the margins are so much closer that if they gerrymander, if they turn two 20% Republican margin districts into 15% Republican margin districts, they could lose all of them.
Yeah, I also think there are concerns in Texas. Did the Republicans rely on maps that included a Latino vote that went toward them one time? Is that over relying on it? I don't think that any of these things are shoo-ins necessarily. And then the other thing I'll say is, it's unfortunate that this is all happening, because the trend had actually been moving, including in red states, toward independent redistricting, which was fairer. And I hope this is not something we continue to do.
I agree with you.
Cycle.
And I live in a state that's been gerrymandered the other direction. And I agree with you, and I believe we will get there. In fairness, Congress tackled this in the John Lewis and other bills that they came very close to passing, 4 years ago. Very close. They just couldn't break a filibuster in the Senate. But I believe we will get there, and we will.
I hope so. I do think this all undermines faith in the system and faith in voting writ large for people of all political persuasions. And I think that is it is sad, it's dangerous, and I don't want that to happen any more than it already has.
No. And I believe that Americans share your views, and they're angry that politicians have placed their own preservation over our goodwill. One of the things that politics hasn't done well is explain to Americans why a functioning democracy is actually better for their living outcomes. We haven't taken the time to say, look, if your legislators work for the map, make money, they just don't care about your life. You can come, you can show up at their office, it's irrelevant. But if they actually work for you, if the boundaries are such that they need your votes, they got to pay attention to the quality of your life, and it makes a difference.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot of the idea of the salience of democracy as like a talking point in elections. I think people don't think of it as writ large as it really is. And that's probably on the politicians to do a better job of explaining in many instances, like why democracy being under threat is, an active daily problem for the average person instead of just, a blanket term.
Well, I think the pollsters say, well, people are more concerned about economics, so just talk about economics.
Yeah.
But a statesman, a good politician, should be able to explain to people that the economic problem is related to the political problem.
For sure. Right? Hopefully there are some
Yeah.
people out there who can start making more complex arguments. And
Yeah. Well, Rachel, you do terrific work. The Guardian is a treasure. Tell people a little bit about how they find The Guardian. Tell them that when they get there, that thing that they see is not a paywall.
Yeah.
Right? Just explain where you and your work sits in the media ecosystem for people.
So our website is theguardian.com, and The Guardian is based in the UK, but we have a very large US presence in terms of reporters and editors these days, including people in large coastal cities, but some of us also in the middle of the country. And if you're in the US and you go to the main page, it will largely be US based news. You'll find, all manner of coverage of politics, coverage of democracy, cultural stuff, all kinds of good things.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a little thing that pops up that'll remind you that you can donate money to support our work, but it's not a paywall. All the work is free. So you can also just, click out of that and keep reading.
Yeah, the work is not free. It's free to those of you who click on it and want to read it, but it still has to get paid for. Rachel deserves to be paid.
You can definitely donate. We love when we get reader support. It also helps us know, the work we're doing is meeting what people are interested in.
Yeah. Well, listen, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your work. Whatever brought you from Arizona here to the Great Lakes to Minnesota for winter.
I'm a North Dakota girl, so.
Oh, okay, so
yes.
You're ready for it.
Yes, this is nothing compared to North Dakota. So.
Yeah. Well, I love the Great Lakes. I think the Great Lakes are going to save the democracy. I mean, they broke the gerrymander in Wisconsin. They flipped the politics in Michigan. Ohio is. In your state, they've shown a lot of things about how to move a state forward. They have some issues with Medicare fraud, or other kinds of fraud, but they've largely done well for the people of the state. Ohio is still a challenge, but I do think this is a part of the country that is standing strong on its democratic principles and on its fighting for people principles. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah,
I forever a lover of the Midwest and just strive to tell the stories of our region to a global audience these days.
Thank you so much. I look forward to our next conversation.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Bye.
Bye.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. It's time to take your calls at 773-763-9278. Jim, kick us off.
Hi, Edwin. The corruption meter.
Jim, can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. Now I can.
Oh, yeah. Mike, the corruption meter, every day as I view it, it gets to the heavens. I've never seen so much corruption everywhere. You got Stone getting a pardon for a guy doing 45 years, his brother's doing 90, for selling drugs. In the meantime, he's killed about 90 people, murdered 90 people. Then you've got this guy, the mouthpiece, Bannon, who stole 200 grand. I don't see him going to jail. The corruption every day, the corruption in science, the corruption in our news media, the corruption everywhere. It's every day. It's just going to the ceiling. It's going to the heavens. I've never seen corruption like this in my life. It's every day. His sons, what did they paroled a crypto billionaire who defrauded everybody, and now they got a software to put their crypto scheme into play, and they made $2 billion from the Saudis immediately because they'll buy anything apparently from Trump, and they get $80 million a year just in interest, and the rest of us are sweating out January when we lose our health care. I mean, this is the most corrupt. I've never seen anything so corrupt in my life. I'm serious. Every day, everything's corrupted. Science has been corrupt. What about this production with this Hollywood production with Kennedy and that insane panel he has, taking away a 99.5 effective rate for 30 years, and now they're going to. You know what they suggested, that you're going to test a pregnant woman. Well, first of all, she's got to be tested, which is a pain in the behind. Then after she's tested, do you want the shot for the infant, or do you want to take your chances with hepatitis? I mean, believe this or not, by Ripley. Now, this has been for 30 years. So, I mean, the corruption, Edwin, is just through the ceiling. And if he wants to fix this thing in the midterms, I mean, good luck, because the 9 million people that came out in the street, you're going to see 20 million people in the street, and you're going to see violence. Because nobody's going to put up with it. Nobody, forget it. Nobody's going to put up with it, Edwin. Anyway, have a good week. Thank you.
Sure. It's nice to know you feel strongly about it. I do too. And I think you're completely correct. It's not just in your lifetime. There has never been a more corrupt government. They have decided there are no guardrails. They can put their hands in the till. And you know what? They can do it because Pam Bondi is part of this crooked cabal. She will not bring charges. Dave, you're next.
Hey, Edwin. Yeah, I had this story a couple of weeks now. Oh, by the way, welcome back. And
Thank you.
This story was the Netherlands American Cemetery and Memorial in Margraten, the only American military cemetery in the Netherlands, has quietly removed panels displaying the contributions of black American soldiers during World War II, sparking outrage from Dutch and American citizens. One of the two displays features an overall history of black American military personnel fighting a double V campaign, victory at home and abroad. And then the two panels were added to the Visitor Center in September of 2024 after the American Battle Monument Commission had okayed this, the historians and that for the contributions of the black service members and their experiences fighting in the Netherlands. And the ABMC did not respond to requests for comment from Military Times when they wrote this. The commission, however, told Dutch news outlets that one panel is off display, though not out of rotation, although a second panel was retired. The panels were reportedly rotated out in early March, 1 month after Trump's executive order terminated diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, initiatives across the federal government. In the same month, the panels were removed. The Heritage Foundation, a right-wing think tank, contacted the ABMC for its supposed failure to comply with Trump's anti-DEI initiatives. And then going on with this, and then it went on a little further, but it's, this guy's reach is even overseas,
Oh, I haven't spent a lot of time on this show today, but this week they released the 2025 National Security Plan for the United States. And David is entirely infected with racist nonsense. It is all about keeping the world, ending migration so that different kinds of people don't run into each other. And what they said about Europe was that we signed NATO with a Europe that was white. And now that there's migration, Europe isn't really Europe anymore. So maybe we don't need NATO because that's not who we signed the agreement with, because it looks different. I mean, it's just so shockingly awful, and dangerous for all of us. They lie, they steal, they hate. They got nothing for us. They're driving up our every cost for ordinary Americans while they're taking for themselves. It is, we simply must throw them out. We just simply must, and I think we will.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that story could have kept going on, but I know you got others that want to talk too, and there's a short time, but I just thought I'd get the main part of it.
I'm glad you read it. It's appalling.
Okay, good. Yes, I thought so too. As you know, I'm always very veteran sensitive. So anyway, hey, good to hear you again and talk to you again. Be well.
You bet. You too. All righty. I'm at 773-763-9278, taking your calls, and let's talk to Paul. Hey, Paul.
Oh, hey, Edwin. I like you. I am, well, not stunned, but intensely dismayed that John Roberts and his cabal of crooks on the court are taking this birthright citizenship case, so-called birthright citizenship case. I don't even know what who are the litigants? I mean, this is, I don't even know what the basis for taking the case is, which means that the fact that they have means that I think they're going to hedge towards ruling with Trump. And the argument is, I don't know who the litigants are, if it's Trump versus who, but the issue is, or the question is, right of soil, or just solely birthright of soil, or right of blood, just sanguineous. And the MAGAs seem to think that the 14th Amendment was only intended to cover African slaves who had been brought here and their citizenship. But that, if you start thinking of, and so the fact that they were here and they had ancestry now in the United States was their right of blood, just sanguineous. But when you think about that, you start thinking about questions about how the nation of the United States could have even been formed under that pretext is preposterous.
Well, hang on. Let me ask you a different question about that. Does that mean, if you take that reading, does that just mean that part of the 14th Amendment sunsetted after the last person born enslaved died?
Yeah, there's so many questions.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, how would George Washington ever have been a citizen? And we know that English common law was under right of soil, birthright of soil. What we take the 14th Amendment to be when you're born within the jurisdiction of the United States. That's what English common law was. So to say that if it, in other words, the 14th Amendment was not consistent with the way it had been originally, the original interpretation of what the citizen is, or are we saying exactly as you said? Oh, was it just changed for slaves? But then look at this, and I know you're familiar with the 1898 case of United States versus Wong Kim Ark.
I am familiar.
Okay, so he was born in 1873 in California, in San Francisco. His parents were Chinese, and they were not citizens, but they left after the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, which said Chinese people could not be citizens. So that would also apply to Wong Kim Ark, would it not? Except when the court got the case in 1898, they already said, no, the Chinese Exclusion Act doesn't apply to him because he was born here, right?
Yep. And by the way,
so
back then, the government of China was saying to us, he's our citizen. You can't, he's ours. He belongs to us. He belongs to the emperor.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I say this because all of those justices on the court at that time were alive when the 14th Amendment was written. So they know the intent of the 14th Amendment. However they took it, they know the intent. I actually said this to one of the right-wingers here about one of the gun cases, the Heller versus D.C., and I talked about United States versus Cruikshank in 1876 and quoted Morrison R. Waite, the Chief Justice, who wrote the majority opinion. I said, are you trying to tell me that Antonin Scalia knows more about the intention of the Constitution than the 14th Amendment than Morrison R. Waite? And he said, yes. Well, you just made me laugh. I'm sorry. This conversation is over.
There we are.
The people, yeah, exactly, because the result is what I want. And the fact is that I don't know how Trump. So, in other words, a constitutional amendment, because the president says so, the court says, okay, let's take the case. And is this an ex parte case? Is this just, or who are the? I would think that it would have to involve another party where the government, the United States, is saying you are not a citizen because your parents were not here legally. And by the way, if under right of blood or just sanguinis, it doesn't mean that you have a child and be here legally. It doesn't necessarily mean that the child born here is an American citizen. And then also, one of the biggest problems with that is people around the world, this theory of right of blood citizenship, people having no state having no state, home state, no state. They have no home. If people are born that way, people are born. They're citizens of the soil upon which they're born. And the other thing is that you have to think about, well, what would this mean for the citizenship of Native Americans? If you go back and say, no, it's a just sanguinis citizenship, because under the 14th Amendment, it automatically included Native Americans. They had to be citizens because they were born on the soil.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? So it's all crazy.
The whole thing is, if the court tries to find for Trump, it just opens up a Pandora's can of worms for every question. And we could sit and have coffee for 3 or 4 hours and come up with absolutely perplexing questions over this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ridiculous. It's so disturbing that and I think John Roberts, I'm sorry, he's crossed over to being the worst Chief Justice out of the 17 that we've had in this country. He has surpassed Roger Taney, because I think Roger Taney may have been, a racist and a slave owner, but when he wrote Dred Scott, he was writing what he thought the intention of the Constitution was before the Civil War Amendment. And the fact is, it was right. It wasn't so outrageous. It was outrageous in terms of that's what the Constitution intended, that black people could not be citizens. But they are now. And it took a war to do it. I mean, it was kind of an offensive bit of dicta, 24 pages in that case of dicta, but it was what I believe the founders intended. So, John Roberts has just become a completely political, and so I think the remedy is we have to impeach John Roberts, if for no other reason, to leave his legacy with a black eye, and also Samuel Alito, who will probably write the majority in this case. He will. It'll be Alito. And then hopefully Clarence Thomas will just find his way to the door.
All right, Paul. I appreciate it. It's a lot, but I hope you're wrong, but I fear you're probably right. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. Dan, you're next.
Hello.
Hi, Dan.
Edwin, how are you? Welcome back, sir.
Thank
we missed
you
you
very much. I appreciate it.
I have so many things from what I'm listening to, your past callers. But the actual reason that I called is from one that you had earlier, one of your speakers, talking about the 2026 elections. I would like to submit to you and I've talked to you about this before, actually, that I still give it, well, maybe 50, maybe 60-40, we're even going to have 2026 elections. But if we do, you know as well as I do, they aren't going to be fair, whether it's because of National Guard, whether it's because of ICE, whether it's because of voter suppression, you add it all up. My question to you is, sir, okay, we have the 2026 elections, all of the appeals, and say, like you were saying, the states would say, oh, no, this isn't right, we can't certify this. Then what do we do, sir? What do we do as a country at that point when they won't certify a legal election?
Well, there's a lot of, history about things like that, but millions and millions and millions of people would take to the streets. Millions. And I think people
And do what? And do what?
Surround the Capitol and stay there until they do the right thing.
Okay, I can go for that. Yes, sir.
I mean, there's a lot of history about stuff like that in the world, and I'm all of it's complicated for sure.
Absolutely.
But I really don't want to go there. I don't want to believe that we are there. That they would say to America. I mean, look, the way to interdict this before it happens is for every day for us to say we are going to have elections. We will not be stopped from having elections. Our votes will be counted, and they will matter. Absolutely, they will matter. And you do not get to play games with them like you did in 2026. And we say it every day until they believe it. Because when the time comes, they're going to have a choice. They're going to have every one of those individuals, not Trump, but those individuals will have a choice. And, I'm mindful that on January 6th, but for a handful of them, the Ted Cruz's of the world and the Josh Hawleys of the world, the rest of them didn't go along with it. The rest of them were willing to say, and in fact, demanded that they come back that night and finish the job. Right? And
but are we going to be able to do that again in a midterms? I mean, that was a presidential election, but I'm talking about a midterms, which is a whole different animal, as you know.
I know. I think we have to just have an overwhelming vote. An overwhelming vote. And then, you know what? And then the winners are going to show up for work. They're going to show up for work and they're going to do the work. And we'll have if we have a crisis, we have a crisis if they bring us down that path. But we're going to, the elected ones will do what they do, and they'll pass a bill, and the pretenders will go to court and say this bill isn't law. And is the Supreme Court then going to say, oh, yeah, you know what, we no longer have a democracy? I mean, yeah, things can be very tough. I don't believe it's that bad. I don't. And it particularly, one of the reasons it's not that bad is America hates what's on offer from these people. They are furious that Donald Trump is gilding his own family's fortune and robbing all of us blind. Wait till those health care costs kick in. Wait till, just everything's more expensive. Life is harder under this president. He's done nothing to help us. Instead, he's threatening to go to war, and a war nobody wants in Venezuela, for God's sake. He is all those things you think he is, Dan. I couldn't agree with you more. But even
I'm 73 years old. I'm 73 years old in Indiana. Yeah.
Yeah, but even there,
I can't tell you how bad enough it is. Yeah, they're doing it just to take away my congressman, Frank Mervan.
They may not do it. I have hopes that they won't do it. I mean, we're pushing back hard, and these gerrymanders, if enough people vote, we can overcome them, as we did in Wisconsin. So they better be careful what they wish for. They're going to turn these, huge majority districts into more less huge majority districts, and they could get their butts kicked.
Well, we can only hope and pray because there's going to be a change one way or the other.
I think
I
think really better days are coming. I think we have looked into the abyss with these guys. And when we get power back, we are going to take
myself.
we are going to take some real measures. Anyway, Dan, thank you. I appreciate it. I do. Denise, finish us up.
Hi, Edwin. I'm 73 years old. I'm a black woman, and I don't have hope. I think we have continually said, oh, this can't happen. This is the worst that's going to happen. And every time we do that, we get worse. We get some additional destruction of our democracy. I have no hope. As a black woman, I don't. I don't see that this administration for the next 3.5 years is going to ever do what's right. And unless 70-some million...
You got to live longer than that, because you're right. They are not going to do the right thing.
No, and I don't see 70 million people rising up and saying, absolutely not. We're not going to put up with it. I agree with Dan. I don't see 2 million people in the street is not enough.
No,
we have a Supreme Court that has decided that they are absolutely going to disrail every single color of law, every rule of law in favor of this despot. And I don't see enough people, and frankly, I don't see where this works out too well for black people.
Well, this administration is so. Look, I'm almost your age, and when you and I were little, America was segregated in a way that it is not today, and legal discriminations in ways that are not allowed today. And yet, in our lifetime, we've never had a federal government as hostile to black Americans and anybody who isn't their image of sort of white Christian America. We've never had a government like this, not ever.
No, and when it was shown on the news and people rose up and said, this is intolerable. And we got millions of people that are saying, this is okay. This is what I voted for.
Yeah,
I'm okay.
I hear you, and I am so sympathetic. But let me just I guess end this way. Kamala Harris came so close, right? And she didn't win, and we were up against all kinds of headwinds. We didn't have a primary. Joe was unpopular. People forgot this guy. You know what? If they ran that election today, she'd kick his ass. So, you hear that music, I got to go. But I am not I just think dangerous times for sure. There's stuff we can do. Anyway, everybody, thank you. I'm glad to be back. I'm sorry about the troubles at the beginning of the show. We'll work on those, and I'll see you next week.